This is my final Cuba journal, and I'm recording this when I'm at my house back after our trip. The great thing about Cubans is they're very hospitable and they like to share, and the one thing that Cuba shared with me was a parasite. So I've been sick for we're going on 48 hours now. Sicker than I've been in a really, really, really long time. I lost 6 pounds overnight with this sickness. I feel like our Cuba trip is something that I'm going to be processing for a really, really long time. I'm going to be processing all of the various facets of life. Incredible generosity, incredible poverty, a political system whose ideals are very similar to Christianity, but who in practicality makes life really, really rough for a lot of people. But also that makes me question our own political system. I mean, of course, our own system of economics, our own capitalist society where greed is the winner of the day. We have so much wealth, and yet there are still people who are hungry. There's still people who are homeless. And we still have churches who care more about their own budgets and their, whatever's going on internally than their neighbors across the way who are starving. Concepts like non-hierarchical church structure is going to haunt me, I think, for the rest of my life, and haunt in the sense of I'm not sure I'll ever be satisfied going back to the ways the majority of us do churches, run church. But one of the stories that I haven't told in any of the other videos reminds me a lot of one of the books that we had to read that was called Misunderstanding Stories by Melinda McGarry-Sharp. And basically her book, she kind of follows 4 case studies of her own experience when she was working with the Peace Corps in a completely different culture, and how there were these kind of 4 kind of cultural clashes that happened with her. And she uses these as case studies throughout the book. One of her points is by reflecting and processing on even these negative moments, as opposed to just the whole, these were moments of unity and moments where even in our differences we came together. She kind of says by being able to process and think through the negative moments, the moments where our cultures have clashed together, it can help us grow better in our understanding of each other, of the other culture, of what happened. There was one night on our trip where we watched a documentary about the literacy campaign that happened right after Fidel was elected, right after Fidel won the revolution, and how there was this goal to get, the entire country to learn how to read. So they asked for all these young people to sign up if they wanted to. And they did in droves, and then they trained them and they sent them off into the most remote parts of the island to teach people how to read. And it's an incredible story. They really did. Cuba to this day has one of the highest literacy rates for a country, of any country in the world, which is just awesome. They were well taken care of. They were heralded. It was a really, really cool thing. I see this. Let's just call that the result of me being sick for a little while. Okay, so when we were done and they were asking us questions, one of the women in our North American group asked the question, has there been any huge movement like that since? Has there been any huge movement of youth, like that, where they rallied around to do something good since then? And I noticed that the woman taking questions was really kind of put off by this. She wrote it down and said she'll answer it in just a second, but she wanted to ask for other questions, so it's like she had to kind of take a moment to pause before she could formulate her answer. And then her answer was, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. And then her answer was basically just a repeat of the documentary, which was, the revolution stamped out racism, the revolution stamped out sexism, the revolution stamped out illiteracy. And we have, there hasn't been any movement like this since, but it's because this movement did it all. So I walked up to one of the translators after, because I was kind of disturbed by that answer. So I walked up to one of our translators after this and asked her if she would come translate for me so I could go ask that woman this question. She said, well, why don't you just ask me your question? Maybe I can help answer it. And I said, okay, well, I'm just not understanding, that last question that one of the women asked. I guess my question is, are there no other goals for your country? Is there nothing else that you hope, your country will achieve if there have been no other, movements since then? And she goes, no, you don't understand. The country has already achieved everything. And I said, what? And she goes, the racism and the sexism and the illiteracy. And I said, oh, yeah, no, that's incredible. I think that's a phenomenal thing that, those things are no longer a part of your life here. That's just incredible. But are there other goals? Where are you hoping that your country goes next? What's next for you? What are there no other hopes that y'all have for your government? And she said, no, you don't understand. The goals are just to continue the goals of the revolution. We met these goals, and now it's just to continue to make sure that we keep teaching people to read, to make sure that there's still no racism or sexism. And it was really she just very much kind of shut me down. No, you don't understand. Which we'd been with this translator for 4 days at this point, and so that was the first time I've ever seen her and I realized, okay, I've crossed a line. I need to just back off. I think that she's not understanding me. She keeps telling me that, no, I just don't understand. So I'm going to stop. And I had a real problem that night sleeping, because I was thinking, oh my gosh, all of these people have drunk the Kool-Aid, essentially. They talk on and on and on about how wonderful these ideals of the revolution are, and yet they're starving. And there are things happening that they don't, that aren't in their benefit. And do they really not see that? And that was really disturbing for me, because it felt very inauthentic. It felt very almost like a lie of we're not going to do anything. But then, within the very next day, we asked the women for prayer requests. It was the last day that we were going to be together for a while. And we asked the women for prayer requests. And I don't think I'll ever forget that moment, because they talked about people who are sick and can't get medicine. They talked about people who are hungry and can't get food. They talked about a pastor who left to go to the United States for a few months and came back and his house was gone and now he has nowhere to live. They talked about all these things, and it made me realize they see that there are flaws. Maybe they can't say it out loud. Maybe one or two of them who are younger can't see it as much. Maybe they all can, and they just don't have the ability to articulate it in a large group of people. But they see it. I think that's a hard place to live, in the in-between. In a place that says, my faith says that the ideals of this revolution are the ideals of Christianity. And I really don't think they're wrong in a lot of ways. And yet the way those ideals are playing out, the way this revolution is playing out, it's not better. They live in this weird liminal space, I think. They have to know how to navigate their own government, their own country, with their own faith. I give them incredible props.